get into this. In lieu of an introduction, what I'd like to say is, where are my notes? Come on now. This thing doesn't have my notes on it. What I would like to say, there are my notes, there we go, is coming up with the Spring 23 release highlights. I reached out to a handful of people who I wanted to ask to volunteer to lead this. And I had a fantastic response. We had like 5 people who volunteered to do this. And what I opted to do was sort of spread the wealth. So we are covered, I think we're covered through spring and winter 23. We have people set up to help us cover those. And my goal for this is really to have the community build up its own momentum for these meetings. A lot of the time, there's a big draw, there's a big name draw, someone with a unique perspective or a deep perspective to come and share on a particular topic. But I would absolutely love it if 3 meetings out of the year, it's just the Salesforce developer group, and we're just talking about the latest in Salesforce and hanging out around that. And so Ishta, who was the first one to volunteer, is going to help push that boulder down the hill, which I'm incredibly grateful for, and really looking forward to have more community members volunteer to give their own perspective and pitch in this particular way. So this is my open invitation to everyone. If I haven't reached out to you yet, trust me, I will. And this is really, it's about a 2-hour commitment. What it really entails is reading through the release notes. And the goal is not for you to be an expert on every little thing in there. It's just for someone to have read the release notes on behalf of the group and to let us know what is relevant and who it's relevant for, which is exactly what you'll see as we move on. Ishta, all set? Shall I jump in?
Yes, sure.
All right, let's do it. So first topic is Lightning components. This release is basically grouped into web updates to Lightning Web Security, some new and enhanced features, and some changes to the developer experience. Lightning Web Security is something that sort of sits in the background that if you're an LWC developer, you may never really have interacted with. Prior to Lightning Web Security, what we had is Lightning Locker. Lightning Locker is the security architecture around web components. It's the way that the JavaScript is encapsulated in its own little box so that it's not interacting with and touching and getting data from your browser or from your larger Salesforce instance. So it's the encapsulation of your Lightning Web component or other JavaScript that facilitates security. This has been refreshed to Lightning Web Security, which is now general audience for LWCs and beta for Aura components. What that means is the default security model is Lightning Locker. You can enable web security, LWS, web security, for your web LWCs in general audience and for your Aura components in beta. So what does this enable you to do? Well, we have improved security as far as third-party library access. Lightning Locker, because of its architecture, still has a couple of holes, and some of those holes have been patched by the move to Lightning Web Security. Those holes, if you want to get deeper into it, which I don't, Demo might, are things as far as how does third-party JavaScript interact with your browser APIs, interact with your Salesforce APIs? What data does it have access to? How is it able to do things like manipulate the DOM? So that's different between LWS, and the security has been improved. And then we have improved access. So it's improved security, but it's also improved access, which is easing some of the restrictions that Lightning Locker had. For example, with Lightning Web Security, you can now access content that's in an iframe, which you could not do before with Lightning Locker. So who is this relevant for? If you have been developing LWCs and running into consistent headaches where what you are trying to do doesn't work with the security model, then Lightning Web Security is worth getting to grips with because it might resolve a lot of those issues. I have a little graphic here that is a visual of Lightning, of what LWS looks like. So you have your browser, and then, sorry, go back. Yes, you have your browser, and then each one of those sandboxes is a JavaScript namespace. So say, for example, you have your LWC and a third-party library that you're using. Those are now contained in a virtual environment. And then around that, you have LWS, which is facilitating interactions between those virtual environments. Whereas with Lightning Locker, you didn't have these sandboxes. So visually, that's the new element. New and enhanced features. There's a lot of them. The big winners in this regard is LWC developers and Aura developers. It's been clear for a while and continues to be clear that the initiative, the investment, the interest is towards LWC developers and away from Visualforce. Visualforce is mature as a technology, and there's not that many new features to Visualforce. Really, as I'll show you shortly, everything has to do with security and making sure that Visualforce is at security parity with LWCs. Security parity, big asterisk. One of the new / enhanced features that I'd like to highlight is GraphQL wire adapters. What that means is you can import GraphQL as a dependency to your Lightning Web Component, and then write a GraphQL. So you can retrieve data using GraphQL by calling the GraphQL wire function with your graph schema payload. We have a demo of the GraphQL API set up for later. So if that's something you're interested in, then you'll get to see what that looks like from a REST interface point of view. And this update means that you can do that within the context of an LWC. And then developer experience. So we can now debug wire methods in our Chrome DevTools. Previously, with a wire method, if you wanted to see the output of a wire method, either you debug it on the Apex side, or you write a JavaScript function to debug it on the JavaScript on the client side. Now you can, through the Chrome DevTools, there's a setting you need to enable, and you can see the output of a wire method through your Chrome DevTools. So you can see what it looks like directly on the client. This is important. LWC runtime flags are dead. The release was a little vague, but they no longer affect LWCs. So LWC runtime flags are a setting that it's a configuration that allows you to enable or disable features on an LWC through this method by calling LWC runtime flags. Those no longer work. So if you've been using those in your testing or in your function, then that needs to be deprecated and updated to the current model. Finally, last time, winter 22, we talked about the UI test automation model. This is a framework that allows JavaScript developers, front-end developers, to mock a page using JSON. So rather than using your code to open up a page and then scroll through the DOM, you're mocking the page in JSON and then running your test against that JSON mock. There's been a couple of updates in that regard. The primary one, or there's a lot of updates. So if this is relevant to you, it's worth looking into. One of the updates that I'd like to highlight is something called the UTAM Chrome extension. So let's switch over quickly and show that to you. So there's now a UTAM Chrome extension that will let you, when you're browsing through your Salesforce instance, will show you any UTAM pages you have that are relevant to this instance. So say, for example, I'm looking at the account record detail page, right? When I'm looking at the account record detail page, I now have a Chrome extension UTAM that will let me find my UTAM page that is relevant to this, to the record detail page I'm looking at, and any methods that are relevant to it. I only played with this a little bit. I couldn't quite get it to work, but essentially you install the extension. You now have a UTAM tab in your inspector. And that UTAM tab is looking at the page and finding page objects that relate to the page you're looking at. It's not going to find anything even though I have them, just because I couldn't get it to work. So if you look at the UTAM, there's a bunch of UTAM page objects that you can import and then use them against the page that you're looking at. If this is something you're interested in, we can definitely follow up offline and I can share with you what I found. All right, back to it. Visualforce. Postponed / canceled updates. If you've been on the cutting edge of Visualforce development, things are constantly changing and there are updates from previous releases that have been deprecated or removed. validate getter setter access modifiers. I think that's from winter 23. Prevent consecutive API navigation calls, and escape expression language validations. If you have an expression in your CSS and you were escaping that as per a previous release, all of those have been either postponed or canceled. New and enhanced JSON access annotation. That just means if you're using JS remoting, then your Apex class that you're calling from JS remoting needs to specify whether or not it's allowed to serialize data. And then escaping your Apex input field label attributes to prevent a cross-site scripting attack. I read this, I was like, what? So this update is Salesforce is, when you create a Visualforce page and you have an Apex input field on it, the label attribute of that Apex input field is now going to be escaped in order to prevent a cross-site scripting attack. This emoji is because for the life of me, I have never heard of a cross-site scripting attack that happened through an attribute on an Apex input field. So this is like, I can only imagine some security flaw was identified, but this is way in there. This is pretty deep. But if it's relevant to you, right, it's right there. And that is it as far as Lightning components and Visualforce. Something I didn't mention is we're going to highlight the heavy topics, the LWC, the Visualforce, the Apex, etc. And then at the end of this, Ishta and I will sort of open the floor, put up all of the topics, open the floor, and let you pick and choose what you want to discuss beyond that. So if we skip the topic that you're interested in, don't worry, it's coming up. Ishta, over to you.
Thank you, Tony. So moving ahead, Apex. I personally believe that the updates made in this release would help us developer to ease our life. So for this presentation, I have divided them into 3 buckets, that is security, productivity, and performance. Moving ahead to security. So the first one, many of you might be aware of it, user mode. It was released previously, but was in beta, and now it's generally available. So what this will help us with is our Apex class. It usually runs in system mode. And if we want to perform any searchable or database queries in user mode, we can do that using this with user mode keyword in the query. And then this what this will do is it will run the query in system in this user mode, sorry. So it will run the query in the user mode, and then all the FLS and the record level permissions would be allowed based on the user permission. Moving ahead is enforcing RFC 7230 validations. So these are for all the users who have exposed their REST APIs using Apex REST response header. So once you enable this update, then what will happen is any header that is added using a REST response header would be validated against this RFC 7230. So if you have any backslash character in it, it would result into an error. I would suggest that before enabling this in production, try enabling it in sandbox, running all the test classes, and then enable it in production so that nothing get failed. Moving ahead is restricting anonymous Apex to the core user. So this is for any admin or developer who wants to restrict their execute anonymous only to the core users. So once this update is activated, then irrespective of what user permission they have, like even if they have Apex author permission, even then they won't be able to use the execute anonymous window. Moving ahead is the sandbox post copy script. Okay, so this I haven't got a chance to work with. If any of you have, please feel free to add in. So from what I read about it, so sandbox post copy script, it's a script which allow us to manipulate the data once the sandbox is created or refreshed. So, say for example, if we want to invalidate any email fields so that while testing the email doesn't get triggered to the client, we can do it in that. And with this release, this script will run with the same user permission as of automated process user. Uh, we can go ahead to productivity. I think data viewer is a big winner for me personally. So what this will help us with is it will help us to transform the data into different format. Previously, whenever I used to get a REST response, I used to write wrapper class and sub wrapper class to convert those data. But now with the help of this data weaver, we can just write a script and then call that script into our Apex class. It will transform the data for us. So it will make our life easier. It will be scalable and also efficient to use. Moving ahead. Uh, the next update is passing, like we can now pass uh, the variables, like the bind variables dynamically. So what this means is, say suppose you have an Apex class wherein you wanted to pass the variable dynamically, or say suppose that you want to segregate your a big class into smaller versions, and then you needed to pass 100 more other variables because they were being used somewhere else. So now with this update, you can just declare a map, and the keys of that map would be used to map like the bind variables when the query is getting executed. Moving forward is it's on the same slide.
On the same slide, sorry.
That's fine. So now we can get all the Apex class that implemented the interface using SOQL query. Previously, when I needed to search for any Apex class that has implemented an interface, I used to go to VS Code and then search for an Apex class over there. But now with this release, we can just write an SOQL query and it will return all the Apex class that implements that particular interface. So I think this is a good upgrade, I would say. Moving ahead, so now we can get source as object from describe field results. So for this particular update, I have seen some ideas floating around wherein users wanted to get the describe field results to have their source object with them. Because if we make any chunk of data code dynamic, we had to pass the source as object, or we needed to find some turnaround wherein we can identify which object this field belong to. But now with this release, we can get the source as object directly from describe field results. So moving ahead. Next is performance. So now with this release, what Salesforce has added is we can add delay to queuable jobs. So say suppose, for example, there's a scenario wherein we need to have some pull request. So instead of like sending the request continuously, what we can do is we can add a delay in the queuable jobs so that we do not exhaust all our async apex limit. So this can be done using two ways. One is the org-wide default. So we can say we can set the org-wide default to all the queuable jobs. And I think it's from 1 to 600 seconds, which we can set. And the second is we can set the delay while we are enqueuing the job. So again, one thing to note over here is, since there are two ways of adding the delays, the enqueue method will override org by default. So say suppose we set the org by default to 1 minute, the delay to delay to org by default to 1 minute. And then we are setting the NQ jobs delay to 5 minutes. So now this my queuable class, it will run after 5 minutes and not 1 minute. Uh, if anyone wants to add any more thing, please feel free to add it. Moving ahead.
Well, why don't we pause there for a moment?
Sure.
As far as Lightning components, Visual Force, and Apex, are there any burning questions that we can address or aspects of those releases that someone would like to go a little bit deeper into? Going once, going twice, moving on.
Okay.
But as always, feel free to post that in the chat.
So moving ahead is our Einstein vision. I personally haven't got a chance to work with Einstein vision. If someone in our group has, and if they want to share something and how this release would affect their work, please feel free. So this release, what new features they have added is now OCR can detect text. So what this means is irrespective of the type of text, like if it's handwritten or if it's typed, it can now detect the text from any image or from any PDF. I think this is a cool functionality, so that now we can have every document, like every item documentized. Moving
Let
ahead.
me add a little bit of
Yeah.
context
Mhm.
here. In the Winter 22 release, the Einstein Vision updates were OCR scanning. So being able to scan a typed document and pull those into preset fields. So you have a typed document, say you have a printed out invoice. You're able to use Einstein OCR to scan the invoice and map the data on the printed invoice to preset fields in your system. I think what this is saying is that is now available for handwritten documents as well. But I'm
Yeah.
not sure to the extent to which what it's able to do for typed documents, it is also able to do for handwritten documents.
Yeah, this is something that we can look into more. True. So moving ahead, if we have any people, I think we have people who have packages on App Exchange. So this updates are for them. So so yeah. So now with this update, so initially the first one that we see that we can set the default language. So this update was present earlier, but it was only for first generation managed package. But now in this release, it is also available for unlocked and second generation managed package. So what they have done over here is now we can set the language to our package, and then this will help our clients. So even if we are not using workbench, the transformation workbench, client can use them to transform the data in whatever language they want. Like if we just include this language to set a default language for a package. The second one, I won't say that this is an update, but it's rather an thing to look for. So if you have any hard-coded URL in your managed package, wherein you have assumed that the URL would be in this specific format for any Salesforce hosted domain, so for suppose Visual Force pages or content pages, then you might need to remove that hard coding, because you never know if your client has enabled enhanced domain. What I read from enhanced domain, so the Salesforce instance, it would be removed from the URL, but there are more things which enhanced domain will enable. So if you have any hard coding in your packages, you might want to check, because it may break. And the third one is So if you have your packages available to install via metadata, so now you can specify the type, like when the users are installing it, you can specify the type with that security type. I think it's admin only and all users. So you can specify whether this application would be for admin only or for all users. Uh, yes, Kuldeep,
I
do you want
know
to add?
we have Kuldeep and Mike Honkam, Honkam, who are our ISP folks. Who else is working at an ISP?
I am not, but just one thing for enhanced domains is Salesforce also said they're going to redirect everything to the enhanced domains, but they haven't given a timeline. So they say we're going to redirect it. They just don't say it when we're going to stop, in case.
So don't get caught flat-footed there.
Yeah, the enhanced domain. So I've talked to pretty much a lot of my customers about it. It's not that big of a deal unless you, for two reasons. You're using you hard-coded URLs in your sandbox, or you're using sites. But if you're just using regular Salesforce, you're just logging in, there's no, you shouldn't have an issue.
The other one you might run into is under remote sites, if that URL is hard-coded, but generally at this point, that's usually not an issue.
Yeah.
I have also heard about partial enhanced domain, like partial domain. Like while I was searching for it, I also heard about it. Is it something like, does anyone know anything about that?
Oh,
Partial enhanced domains.
Yeah, partial domains. I don't remember the word exactly.
No, I haven't seen either. It's a checkbox. You either turn it on or off. However, one thing to know about enhanced domains is this is also a good time to change your my domain. So if you didn't like what you had, and also if your site, so if you're using the site's domain, it's different than your enhanced domains, they now normalize to the same value.
Awesome. Okay. Again, the ISV members can help us more over here. So I myself haven't got a chance to work on this particular aspect of Salesforce. So with this release, what they have done is the ISV members can now analyze how their customers are using CRM analytics in their managed package. The other updates are, so the operation type field. So initially, like previously, it used to count everything like read, SOQL query, and SOSL query. But now with this update, what they have done is there's a separate count for each of this operation. So each of them would have their separate count and separate limit. Moving ahead, it's the same like for read counts. So initially the num read, it used to summarize read, SOQL and SOSL operations, but now SOQL and SOSL SOQL and SOSL operations won't be counted, and it would be only read operations. But please feel free to add more things over here.
So if you open up another browser, there's this app on the App Exchange called ISV app. If you just type in ISV app and then Salesforce, this is actually really cool. So Salesforce allows an ISV to pretty much see kind of like all your metadata. So we have it. So it's kind of scary that anybody that has, for example, my app installed, I can see how many records they're creating, what functions they're doing, and I could do it on a per function basis. So this kind of expands upon that. So there's a lot of cool things that an ISV has, but unfortunately not that many ISVs take advantage of this. So, but
Mike, do you agree, disagree with that assessment? Or to what extent are ISVs taking advantage of their analytics?
We do dig into it some, not as much as we would like. And actually just took a note about the previous slide, so I got to dig into it a little bit more. I'm more on the development side, so I don't really deal a lot with the App Exchange stuff that we bring into. So basically what happens, for those that don't understand what an app does, is we have our own Salesforce org, and a lot of that stuff comes in, like if you install our app in your Salesforce org, we get all this information dumped down to us, and we can do all kinds of different stuff with it. As far as like, you know, the people that installed it, we have access to know what version of the app you installed and stuff like that. So, but I'm not really on that part of the, or that side of the process.
Which is your app?
Breadwinner.
Oh yeah, we had a joint customer, Congo, Capado.
Yes. Yep.
Interesting. So Copado was a customer of both Breadwinner and
Kugamon.
Kugamon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they.
Yeah, and there's other apps that use Kugamon with Breadwinner. I don't know off the top of my head.
I wonder if that's part of your analytics. What other apps are they using, and what's the what is that number? What's the number that tells you the overlap between you and someone else?
What do you mean overlap?
7 degrees of separation.
Yeah, degrees of separation between me and X
Yeah.
app. Who do I need to buy because they already have 99% of my customers?
What?
Or 0% of my customers?
Yeah. This is really cool stuff though, because I didn't realize that this was new stuff in the new version. So
Yeah, the best way to take advantage is ISV app. I think it's like around like 10 grand a year to get started with them. And you get the data dump the day after. So it's not real time. So you get yesterday's data.
So handing it over to the crowd, those are a subset of the highlights. There are a couple of other topics that were part of the Spring 23 release. What I'd like to do is hand it over to all of you to do one of 3 things. If there's a topic here that you'd like to take a look at, we've read all of them. We're happy to guide you through, open up the page and highlight some things. So 1, here's a topic I'm interested in. Can we take a look? 2, we have a demo of the GraphQL API and sort of a rehash of the demo we did last time of the DevOps Center. So if either of those are interesting to you, then I'm happy to pull them up and we can sort of mess around with GraphQL or the DevOps Center. Or 3, if there's an aspect of the release highlights that we covered that you'd like to talk more about, dig deeper into, then raise it and let's go to that page and have a conversation.
Yeah, my vote would be with or at least start with GraphQL, because I think probably going past 8, some people might need to drop.
Oh,
and
yes.
that's a fairly new thing for a lot of developers. Should be interesting to share.
Very good point. Being conscious of time, so acknowledging that it's getting late and people are going to have to drop soon. Here, there's a slide on Event Bus. Thank you all so much for coming to the event and kicking off the year with us. It is truly wonderful to have old people and new people, not physically old people, but people who have been with the group for a long time and people who are new to the group come and enjoy the release highlights. Again, thank you, Ishta, for volunteering to lead us through this. We appreciate you and we hope you'll come do it again. We have a couple of people lined up to do this for the next couple of release highlights. And I encourage you to volunteer. Hit me or Bing up on Slack or LinkedIn or Trailblazer community whichever way, and we will definitely include you in this. As far as the org charter, we're going to invite the community to give comment on that at some point between now and the next meeting. And all of the links to the upcoming events / things to take a look at that we posted are here on Slack. And on Slack and Trailblazer community for sure, maybe even on LinkedIn, you will get a recap of today's events with all of the relevant links. So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure to have you, and hope to see you next time.
No, this was great. She did a great job.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So
Good night.
GraphQL. Question to the crowd: who is familiar with GraphQL? Who is interested in GraphQL or the GraphQL API? Bing is very interested. Bing wants to know all about it.
Yeah, I'd like to know more about it too.
Agreed.
So why don't I start? And I should have had this up. I should have had this open before. I apologize. But the GraphQL API.
Do you want to turn off the
is-
recording for this? Is this like extra credit, or do you want this in the recording?
call it extra credit.
Yeah.
This is digging deeper. GraphQL API, I think it's technically also a REST API, but essentially the difference between the GraphQL API and the REST API is with the REST API, you make a request. Typically, if you're making a GET request, you specify your query and you get back a payload of that data. Say you make a query, say, give me all of my accounts, and you get back a list of your accounts. With the GraphQL API, oh yeah, so it's an alternative to the traditional REST API. With the GraphQL API, you make a post request with a graph schema, and you get back a graph of data matching the schema that you specified. That's really it. That's the top line. Let's take a look at it in action. So here in my Postman, I have a GET request queued up for accounts with their names, and then I have a GraphQL API request with a corresponding schema. So this is what everyone is familiar with. I make a request to an endpoint saying, give me all of the accounts with their names.
Mhm.
And I get back all of the accounts with their names. Here, let me highlight the thing. Yes, there we go. And I get back all of the accounts with their names. With the GraphQL API, what I do is I make a request with a graph schema. And I say, I want accounts from the UI API, and I want accounts, show me their edges, and in the node, specify the ID and name of that account. How is this different from the REST API? In the REST API, you get a list of accounts. In the GraphQL API, you get a graph of accounts, which means if accounts have a relationship to each other, then there's an edge between them. And if you're querying, say, for example, accounts with contacts, you get back a list of accounts with their contacts. If you query using the GraphQL API, you get back a graph of accounts with contacts. You can specify the contacts as additional edges. So now you're seeing not just the data, but the connections between the data. So if I make this request, yes, then I get back a graph of accounts where each of these edges is an account, and the node, sorry, each of these edges is a relation between accounts, and the node is the detail of the account. So in practice, it's not that different. You can still use this, you can still use this as, you can use it equivalent to a REST API. The additional layer of insight that you get is those relationships, because they'll be shown in the edges. What I should have done and what I will do for the next time we look at GraphQL is find a visualizer so that I can visualize this graph for you and we can see some of those interesting relationships. What you can do is grab the Postman collection, make the GraphQL call out for whatever query you have, and then pull this JSON into a visualizer, find a JSON to graph visualizer, and the edges will show you those relationships. Yeah, so that is pretty much it. I'm curious, do I have any parent accounts in here? I'm not sure. Give me a second. So the purpose of this part of the event is for us to mess around and try stuff out. I'm going to try something out. I'm going to create a parent relationship between two accounts and then see if the graph that I get back from GraphQL is any different. So go over to my org. And let's say I want to make the parent of GenePoint into something. Let's make the parent of GenePoint into Grand Hotels. Oh, and I wonder if I have to add the parent account here. Maybe I do. Let's mess around. At this point, all bets are off. We're just messing around. I'm going to mess around a little bit here. Parent account. What is the name of the parent account relationship? Somebody help me out.
Because just call it
Parent ID.
parent, right? Or parent ID.
Parent ID. So again, all bets are off. If this doesn't work, then I cannot be held liable. Give me the parent ID, show me its name, show me the names, whoops. Show me the names value. Yeah, let's give that a try. Whoops. Yeah. So I'm adding to my request payload another piece to the node that is parent ID with name and value. And I'm not sure if that will change the graph that I get back, but let's give it a try. And it says validation error, field name and type ID value is invalid. So let's edit this. All right, so that works. And it lets me know that this has no parents. So then the question is, how do I make the graph show me? Oh, sorry, my bad. Wrong environment. Do the same thing.
Okay, I have a screenshot for you.
Oh, yes.
So there's this app called One Place Global, and they had this really cool feature. Here, I'm trying to, how do I open this up in a new? And well, here you go. They had this amazing feature, and I'll put this in the chat here, where so you had lawyers and they would work at a particular law firm, and it was a relationship between the users to the contacts. So how many times has that user worked with a particular contact? And the thicker the line, a lot. And I'm like, and I thought this was awesome. It's one of the coolest features that I've ever seen. And so
again, this is a relationship between users and contacts.
yeah,
Okay,
so
so here on the right side,
yeah.
we have all of the users, and on the left
Yeah,
side,
so
we have all of the contacts, and that's the number of times that each edge is an instance of someone working with a contact.
yeah, so like for example, let's see. So on the left there were industries, so that happens to be industries. If you like zoom in, but so this is an app for law firms. And so on the right would be lawyers. So maybe you have a lawyer who's a litigator,
Sally Sales.
lawyer, yeah, maybe like Sally does IP, and the other one does corporate securities. And you need to figure out, there's a case for this particular customer, and they're like, okay, well, who knows this area and how long have they been working on it? So it's a great way of just seeing those types of relationships.
Yep.
And I remember seeing this and I'm like, this is incredible. So it looks like, it's called a Sankey diagram. And so you're saying that if we were to do that graph
So if you were to make a query of users with instances of contact, users with an instance of an activity with a contact, through the REST API, you just get that payload and you'd have to process it and get this graph. If you did that with the GraphQL API, then you would get this graph.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think there's an episode on the Salesforce Dev podcast. They were talking about this, and I think it's either Josh Burke or his guest was sort of making an analogy of, you know, the old REST API is more like a sort of you shop for stuff and then make a meal out of it. So you kind of had to do the hard work and put all the ingredients together, get what you want. GraphQL basically gives you a way, if you do it right, you can basically just like ordering stuff from restaurant, because you can give them to say, I want this menu item. The API does most of the job, and when you get the JSON back, you can just kind of feed it through your transformer and get like a visualization like this very quickly. You don't have to do a lot of the combination and tease things out and to get to this place. So that's what the value of using a tool like GraphQL. I find that to be a useful analogy. Of course, to kind of use it well, it still takes some training, but you can't do that with REST API. And one thing was this sort of API do more stuff for you is it's faster, it's more efficient, because your app doesn't have to spend a lot of time once it gets the result from API backend. It's basic and give you the end product very quickly, which is precious for things like a mobile app, because you just get better performance.
I like that. So REST API plus whatever graph analysis program you would have had to put in anyway equals what you would get from the GraphQL API.
Yeah.
I wonder, let's see if there's any notes on this developer episode. There's Ben, unfortunately, there's just Ben on LinkedIn. There's no demos.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So definitely play with it, and anyone finds interesting use of those, and it'd be lovely to see it. Yeah, and that's something I want to add is for the future reviews we're going to do, it would be great if people can, you know, if they think of something or they heard about something from the new release and you really want to see it, just kind of put in the chat and just say, you know, this sounds really cool. Can anybody do something and show a demo? Because sometimes there's just quite a few different things in the new release, and it's hard to decide what to spend time on to build a demo around. So any input would be helpful.
In the future, I'd love to demo my app to you guys, since you guys are developers, and I'm trying to push what can be done with Lightning. So I'm kind of curious on your take on some of the things that we've been doing.
We would absolutely love that. Bing and I are still figuring out the calendar for the year, but there's an open slot for a technical demo of a product that shows us how they're pushing the edge. Is something that there's definitely a place for. And I would even go as far as saying, can we have a series with you? Can we have a series on Kugamon and show us a couple of different aspects that highlight?
Yeah, I can show you some
whatever
stuff.
You can do with one event, can you do it with 3 events and really showcase everything that you intend to showcase to all of the different audiences that you want to get paying attention?
Yeah, I'd have to, there's some cool things that we're doing that nobody on the planet is doing. About package ownership, because one of the challenges that we see is that there's a lot of big footprint apps, like Kapato has a lot of packages, our app has a lot of packages, and a lot of customers don't upgrade. And they may have had issues, but also like upgrading multiple package apps is not easy. You have to usually go to a separate website, or you may not know. And then some clients will balk like, oh, like prove to me your new version is the right package.
Why
And
should I bother?
Yeah.
This version works fine.
And
Yeah.
some of these clients, they're like, they don't know shit. Like I could force the upgrade immediately. I don't have to go through you. Like, you know, the ISV has so much power and stuff like that. But you kind of spend time educating them, but then you're like, like one of my apps, I have 2,000 production installs, production orgs. So I'm like, I can't be like, I'm on this email back and forth with Barclays Bank, and this guy's asking me for like nonsense. He's like, oh, my security team has like this theory of something that can go wrong and blah, blah. I'm like, dude, I'm the ultimate owner. It's not going to happen, and I have to prove him against like this hype of. So it's really interesting. Like, how do you get people to like be on the latest version? Because Salesforce makes platform changes, and ISVs kind of being squeezed in that they need to take advantage of these new changes, and you can't have people on old versions.
So you're being squeezed by customers who don't want to upgrade and Salesforce that is constantly upgrading the platform and forcing you to upgrade your package.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the ISV, you want to surprise and delight your customer. Like you want to have an awesome app, like for example, the transition from classic to Aurora to Lightning Web Components and stuff like that, or just little things as the technology improves, you want to make the app better.
Yeah.
And so there are some new technologies that we're doing that has never been done before. I kind of like to kind of like to get your take and stuff like that. But anything that we demo, these would be non-recordable meetings.
That's okay.
But kind of like to get like, yeah, you guys are little techie folks, love to get your take, because we're in our little echo chamber trying to figure out what's the best.
Yeah, that would be really good. I think also for the reason of, again, perspective is it's really important for almost everybody who works with an award to understand, behind the scenes how these apps are put together and how they interact with your work. I feel for a lot of people, they feel these apps they rely on every day, but these are the sort of black box they're afraid to open. And so they don't handle them properly. Like you said, not being able to upgrade is one thing, but there are other things. And just for developers and admins alike, it's actually very helpful for them to understand how the whole ecosystem is built and interact with different parts. So they can manage their apps and also ask proper questions when they need to onboard new apps or sometimes migrate from one to another. That's just common task, happens all the time. But at least in our business, we see a lot of customers are not doing that very well. So it's really a question of knowledge and sort of getting opportunities to get some education. And sometimes that education sort of best come from the publishers. So yeah, would be very helpful for the members.
I like that. There's an opportunity to be a thought leader on educating users on the value of staying up to date with packages. So not just for Kugamon customers, but for Salesforce customers who are using an App Exchange package.
Yeah, in general, yes.
Yeah, I remember I was at Dreamforce and I went to talk to the folks at Crossbeam, and I'm like, man, like you guys got this problem with your app. And then they asked me like, oh, are you on the latest version? Like, oh, I don't know. So I've been, I've had to deal with it as well. So I think Salesforce, there's a lot of, there's a lot of silly mistakes that ISVs make. Like they'll include those free, those junk fields and in their app, like generator count or something like that. And then later on they'll like delete it. It's just like there's a lot of silly things. So
I like the potential. Let's definitely pursue that. So it's already 8:08 p.m. Enric, Dimon, Krishna, Ishtal, Clay, Ken, Maya, David, anything that you folks would like to take a look at that we haven't already? Where's this thing? There we go.
Let's say
Maya,
20.
let me call you out since this is your first dev group meeting. Why don't you close us out? What would you like to take a look at, either from this list or from the demo, which is DevOps Center, or from the topics that we covered initially?
How about DevOps Center?
DevOps Center. Sorry. Why don't we take?
I'm gonna have to go get my dog. So nice meeting you guys. This is my first time on the call. Thank you. You guys are really
Yeah.
smart, really cool.
Good having you here.
Looking forward to
See you
seeing.
again.
Take care.
Yeah. So yeah. Take care. Have a good night.
Ken, what have you interacted with so far as the DevOps Center goes? What do you know about the DevOps Center?
I don't know much about it. I've heard of it. We use GearSet primarily for our DevOps.
Mhm.
But I heard that Salesforce is going to be offering something that native DevOps tools. So I was curious.
All right. That's a
See
good
it.
starting point. The DevOps Center is a source-enabled DevOps tool embedded within the Salesforce platform. Under the hood, it is creating a link between your GitHub branching strategy and your Salesforce environment pipeline. Environment pipeline. So that when you merge from your feature branch to your UAT branch, you're also merging from your Scratch org to partial. That's it. That's really all it is.
I would say sort of it has the basic automation capabilities for building CI/CD pipelines, but it's not meant to compete with a product like GearSet. It's on a different level. It's very easy to sort of get started, and it's free. I think it will probably remain free. And it's easy to learn, and particularly geared towards a team that's relatively inexperienced with DevOps, and because it really doesn't have many things to set up before it can run.
Does it have automation capabilities?
Yeah, you basically manage your change in here. You create things, what they call work items. These are like your Jira stories. And then once you have that, you can use that record to drive the pipeline. You can just basically say, oh yeah, I'm ready to move this work item from one stage to another. And then in between, you can select what you need to move. And it will just, you basically by just dragging it from the one stage to the next one, the automation behind it will take the defined set of changes and then deploy it for you, and also handle the back end, which is basically creating a feature branch, commit source and commit the metadata in log, and doing a PR, merge a PR. It's all happening in the background. So for people who are not very comfortable with kind of manually operating GitHub, they don't have to deal with any of that. As long as the administrator set it up properly, and those are all taken care of. So you have a nicely synchronized and managed source control. You don't have to deal with it.
What if like a merge is necessitated? It just sends you a pull request. Is that what you're suggesting, or?
Yeah, you can again, you manage all in here because it generates the PR for you, but you don't go to GitHub to approve the PR. You do it in here.
Oh,
yeah. So it basically shield you from dealing with the underlying source.
I see.
Which is a lot of admins don't want to deal with.
Don't want to deal with what, this or with GitHub?
With GitHub.
With GitHub. But it does still have a lot of the limitations because that's sort of version 1 product, and then when you actually have the necessity that you actually have to handle some of the issues like the merge conflict, then you still have to,
You have to get
do
involved.
that. Yeah. So I think it's really quick to start, and it's useful for a lot of teams, but yeah, certainly not for all the use cases. And I also have sort of somewhat discouraging news, and we're trying to roll it out for a client, is we somehow just got stuck at almost the very first configuration pass. We actually couldn't connect to a release environment, which is really just a kind of normal Salesforce work. But for some reason, there was an error message we couldn't resolve. And we had a support case open for 10 days with no progress. So my sense is their support is
It might not be ready for prime time, is it?
yeah, exactly. So they're probably not properly trained to support it just yet. So when there's a problem, maybe you don't get a lot of help from Salesforce. So just that's kind of cautionary note there. But I still see a lot of potential as a full side.
Clay, I think that's a very relevant question. Support for Bitbucket, like I said, there's conversation around it, but there's nothing as far as implementation. And what I would say is, my sense of it is DevOps Center is for you if you've been thinking about DevOps, but you don't have anything on the ground yet. If you've already made investments into DevOps, whether that's GearSet or you're using Bitbucket to manage your source, then you're already too far ahead for DevOps to be really valuable to you.
Yeah, no, I was looking at this when it first came out. I loved it because, I kind of had 2 tracks of management. I had change sets for admins, and my devs are all using, Bitbucket and all Git tooling, right? And so I loved being able to integrate that without the overhead of a package like Capado that puts all this infrastructure in your orgs. So yeah, definitely interested to see this kind of mature and kind of do the bake off between GearSet, Capado, and some of these other players.
Yeah. This is definitely a very light overhead. So that's the part I really like about it. And I think the product manager said, things like Bitbucket and additional source control support is definitely in the plan, but she didn't have a specific timetable on this side.
Got
it. Why don't I walk through? Oh, go ahead. Was someone going to say something?
Yeah, just one question. So is it somewhat similar to SFDX? The
No.
Salesforce DevOps?
So the way that you would interact with the DevOps Center is you would be kicking off a work item. And when you kick off a work item, either you have made a change in a Scratch org that you're now merging, you've made a change in a Scratch org that you are promoting to a different environment, or you've done some work in SFDX and you're committing that to the corresponding branch in Git. So the only SFDX connection is underneath the DevOps Center. I was trying to look for the repo in Git, but I couldn't find it. Let me see if I can find that repo.
Yeah, the underlying,
there's a branch and you might commit work to that branch.
Yeah, the tooling, the underlying tooling, and a lot of the moving parts are essentially operating Salesforce CLI in the back, and sort of the overall SFDX. But just for the users, you don't see any of that, which is a lot of times considered a good thing.
Here, I want to take a look at something that might add some clarity to how the DevOps Center works. So I like this. I'm going to open up this for the other work item that we started during last time's demo. Let me find the activity history. One file committed. Okay, good. So during the Winter 22 demo that we did, we first set up a DevOps Center pipeline, which you can see here. It loads really slow. I don't know if that's just me. I don't know what's been happening. We set up a DevOps Center pipeline with 2 Scratch orgs as our development environments and then my staging environment and my production environment. And then we set up a couple of work items and tied those work items to one of these development environments. I think we tied a work item to one dev environment, and then the other one, we just left it loose. It has a branch in GitHub. So those two work items are 0 and 1 in this list. And then what we did is we made a change to each work item and then promoted that change through the pipeline. So this one right here, you can see, yes, there we go. So you can see work item created, work item connected to dev1. That's the connection between the work item, which is equivalent to the branch in GitHub, and dev1, which is a Scratch org. One file committed means a change has been pushed from the Scratch org and the branch has been, sorry, a change has been pushed from the Scratch org, and that same change has been committed to that branch in Git. And then promoted to staging, the branch has been merged to the staging branch in Git, and the metadata has been deployed or pushed from my dev environment, my Scratch org, to my staging environment. And there might be some merging or packaging with the other work item in the course of that. And then finally, everything gets bundled up. So that's taking work from a bunch of different environments and bundling it up and promoted to production. So this work item has been promoted to production from staging in work item bundle 1.0. And then on the other side, we have the one that was done directly in Git, or rather the work item where we didn't have a Scratch org, we just had a branch, and we committed the new work to that branch in Git. So work item created, file committed directly to the work item feature branch, and then same thing, gets merged, gets promoted through the pipeline. Ken, does that give you a sense of what the workflow in the DevOps Center would look like?
Gives me a sense. Clearly, I think I need to dive deeper into a work item is like a Jira ticket, right?
Exactly.
That's what. Yeah.
Yeah. And this, yeah, thank you, Tony. This also shows, you can sort of be mostly a declarative developer, or you're a pro coder. You can kind of interact and sort of interact with the tool in slightly different ways, and you kind of suit your style of work pretty nicely.
Yeah. But so Clay, to what you had mentioned, this work item is the way that your admins would work. You would start a work item connected to a dev environment. Your admin would do work in that dev environment, and then you would promote it through the pipeline. And your developers who are already used to source control would commit their changes to the work item feature branch.
Cool.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah,
thank you.
I went through the demo. I loved it. I'm going to try to put together a little snapshot that kind of shows how I would use it with my admins, maybe use it as feedback for the team. But thank you.
Yeah.
When you say you went through the demo, is that the recording from the Winter 22?
Actually in Trailhead.
In Trailhead. Okay.
Yeah, no, I was excited, so I kind of dove into it, broke it, went into Git and kind of figured out how to fix it when you have sync issues. Yeah. It was pretty cool. I'm looking forward to the future for smaller orgs. Also interested in the enhancements with Salesforce backups because, we're buying third-party products to do some of this work. And if there's a tool that's suitable, that's something you can always claw back a little bit of investment, things like that.
All right. Thanks for coming, Maya. All right, I am happy to call the evening there. I think we've covered plenty. And again, this is going to be a recurring opportunity. The same things that we talked about this time are going to come back around for summer 22, and we'll just keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You mean summer 23, right?
Yep. See you all summer 23.
Take care, guys.
Yep. Great seeing everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Emma, good to have you. Enric, thanks for coming. David, good to see you. Ken, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Ishta, thank you so much for
hosting.
presenting. Bing, I have Ishta's shipping address. So we
Okay. Great.
over
I could drop some nice,
something in the mailbox.
yep. I'll send it to you. Okay,
Thank
have
you.
a great night. Or
Bing, before you close the thing, let me grab the chat.
Hey guys, I just wanted to say you guys are awesome.
thank you, Dimo.
Thank you.
Or two.
Wait, who is that? Who said we're awesome? Demo.
Dimo.
Yeah.
We do it.
Yeah.
We do it for you.
Yeah, hopefully we'll
Not
do
the group. You. We do it for Demo. If Demo's not coming, it's not worth it.
indeed.